Morning. This morning I'm out doing some macro photography, and I've done a couple of macro photography videos before, but this time it's going to be a little bit different because I'm going to concentrate on a couple of more advanced techniques once you've got the basics, and that is focus bracketing, and in particular two techniques that I really like to use when I'm out doing macro photography. So in this video I'll take you through the kit that you need, the techniques themselves, and hopefully by the end a couple of decent images to go with it. So let's crack on. So I suppose firstly what we should look at is what is focus bracketing and why would we use it for macro photography? Well, one of the problems with macro photography is you're often dealing with a very, very shallow depth of field. So if you've got an insect that's say a centimetre long and you're taking a picture of it and you're focusing on the eye, potentially there's only going to be the eye in focus. Any legs or antenna in front of that eye are going to be out of focus. The body, the legs behind are going to be out of focus as well. So what you can do, you can use a more closed in aperture, close the aperture down on your camera. Now you can do that to a certain point, and I often shoot at say f8 or f10, f11, something like that. But if you go right up to say f16 or f22, you encounter a problem that is inherent in all lenses, and that is when the light's entering the camera, it diffracts off the aperture blades in the lens. And what that causes is the light to diffract in different directions, and it causes a soft image. So it basically softens your final image, which is what you don't want. You want a tack sharp image. So it's often, you don't really want to do that, close the aperture right down. Now the other thing as well is if you close the aperture down too much, often you're working in quite dull conditions. You might be in woodland. You need to get light into your camera. So you've got to do that in another way. And obviously the other ways to do that is decrease the shutter speed. Now if your subject is moving, or if you're moving in any way, that movement can be translated into the image and you're going to end up with a blurred image. The other way obviously is to increase the ISO. Now the problem with that is you increase the noise in the image. So like with all photography, there are trade-offs here and there. That's where focus bracketing comes in. Now all focus bracketing really is taking multiple images of the same subject at a slightly different focus point on the subject. So what you'll do, you'll focus initially on the front of your subject, you'll take a shot, you'll refocus slightly further back, take a shot, you'll refocus slightly further back, take a shot, until you've covered your whole subject. That gives you a stack of images that are all of the same subject but slightly differently focused. Then it's just a case of putting those images into your software, so whether you use Photoshop or like me, Affinity Photo, which has a dedicated part of the program where you just bang all those images of that stack in together, and then the program itself will pull out the sharp bit from each image, stack it all together as one image, pull out the sharp bit from each, and you'll have a sharp image from front to back of your subject. And that's the technique in a nutshell. So basically today what I'm going to do is show you how I take that stack of images, and then from that point on taking them back home, sticking them in the software, and then just seeing what images we get out at the end. Right, so this first technique, now this technique is great really if you want to spend a lot of time on one subject, and I use it for things like plants and fungi. I also use it in the studio for things like product photography, because it's something I can spend an awful lot of time on, and it relies on the fact that your subject is not going to run away, or fly away. So what I'm going to look for this morning is either a plant or a fungi, and I'm going to set up for that, and I'll show you the technique that I used. Right, so hopefully you can see this is not a fast technique. This is quite a laborious technique to set up. So the equipment I'm using, I've got a Vanguard tripod. Now this is quite a nice tripod because it's one of those where you can pull the central column out, which is here, and then you can have it horizontally across the top, which means then the central column isn't sticking out the bottom, and also meaning that you can't get your tripod low to the floor. So this goes really quite low to the floor. And obviously that is really good for macro photography. But you don't have to have one of these. A lot of tripods, what they'll do is you'll be able to take this central column out altogether and then reverse it upside down. So push it through from underneath, which puts your head close to the floor. All it means is that your camera is then upside down and you've got to operate it, which is a bit more fiddly, and I actually quite like to do it this way. Again, none of these methods are quick that I'm showing you now. This method particularly is quite a precise method. That's why it's really good for sort of still life subjects like fungi and plants. So that's the tripod. A ball head, and then what I've got attached to the ball head, this is called a slider. Now this is something you don't have to have. All I'm using this slider for is there's a rail here and a rail here, which means that I can minutely move the camera towards the subject or away from the subject, whichever I want to do, in very small increments, and that's ideal for this type of stacking. So what I'll do, I'll take a shot, move the camera forward like a millimetre, take another shot, and do that for say 10-20 shots to make sure I'm all the way through the subject, and then that's my stack. Now you can do it by just rotating your focus on your lens. That's the other way to do it. I just find this is a little bit more precise, but as I say, this is not a quick method. This is if you've got loads of time and you want to really spend your time on a subject and get it right, this is the way to do it. I've got some nice light today. Occasionally I'm getting bright sunlight, which I don't like. If that comes out again, what I'll do, I'll probably put a reflector or something here just to block the sun, which is up here, because I don't want any harsh shadows across my subject. But anyway, let's take the shot and or shots and see how we get on. Another tip for if you're doing this type of photography as well is to set your focus peaking on your camera so that you can actually see the focus as it moves through a lot easier than having to see whether something's in or out of focus just with your eyes. If you've got a colour that's moving across your subject, like in the minute I've got a nice bright red, so I know exactly which bit of my subject is in focus, and I can see that moving through the subject as I twist that knob slightly every time. So it just gives you a good idea of where the focus is rather than trying to do it by just your eye alone. Right, from that very slow methodical form of photography there I've just shown you, now we're on to very much a run and gun method. So we're talking camera, macro lens, flash, diffuser, and yeah, this is come up to a subject, and if it stays still for 1, 2, 3 seconds, get a quick burst of as many shots as you can and use that in a stack. So yeah, let's go and give this a go and I'll show you how it works. Right, one thing I will do when I'm doing this type of photography, often anyway, is I will take the lens hood off the lens. Really, just because that, when you're photographing things like insects, when things get too close to them, that's when they decide to run off, fly off. So obviously, if you're putting another 1.5 to 2 inches of plastic closer to your subject, some of the times they'll fly off. So if I can do without it, often I'll take the lens hood off and try and manage without it. But that's just a tip. If things are getting a little bit skittish, then that's something you can do. Right, so let's talk a little bit about settings for this method. I shoot in manual focus, and generally I'll go for something of probably about f7.1, f8 for the aperture. It's just really because that's what I prefer, somewhere around in the middle. I think it gives a nice sharp image. As regards shutter speed, 1/250th of a second, because I'm using the flash. That'll take care of that with regards to the amount of light that's coming out. So I shouldn't have any issues with blurred images from sort of movement from myself. And the flash should freeze the subject. Now, as regards to flash power, again, on this flash I tend to shoot with the flash in manual. I don't use TTL or anything like that. I want complete control over it, because for me, if you shoot at 1 full power, you're only going to get 1, maybe 2 shots before the flash is having to recharge itself. I shoot generally at like anything from 1/8 of the power to 1/64th of the power. And what that means is that the flash can take multiple flash shots, so it can sync up with your continuous shooting while you're running over your subject, and you'll get multiple flashes from the flash as you're taking your images, which is exactly what you want. Now, as for techniques, there's a couple of techniques. I try and keep myself as steady as possible. So if I'm on the ground, obviously my elbows are in the floor. If I'm stood up like this and I say I've got a subject on this tree, what I'll try and do is tuck my elbows in. And there's a couple of methods that people use to move the focus over the subject. So the first one is to focus on the front of the subject, and then as you press fully down on the button and it continuously takes shots, just move the focus ring slightly so that the focus is moving over the subject. That's one way of doing it. Now, sometimes I like to keep my hands out of the way, because I think if you start to put your hand forward, it can disturb your subject. That's again why sometimes I shoot without the lens hood on. So in that instance, what I'll do, I'll have my hand sort of under there supporting the lens, and I'll focus on the front of the subject, and then I'll gradually rock my way forward over the subject as I'm shooting. And again, using focus peaking, you will see that red line move over from the front to the back of your subject as you're shooting, and that should give you a reasonably nice stack of images. So they're the two methods. That's the kit involved. You will, I have to say, persevere with this method, because you will get a lot of times when it doesn't work. You know, you're dealing with something that might not want to stay where it is for very long. You can start with subjects that are more docile and don't tend to move. The other hint I would give you is to do this sort of photography first thing in the morning. A lot of the insects then, they might be covered with dew, they might be cold, they haven't warmed up yet, and they're not wanting to move. So then you've got a much better chance of getting that subject stationary. Now, even the method I showed you earlier, that works with some subjects. So I've done things like dragonflies and damselflies first thing in the morning when they're on reeds or whatever, completely still, covered in dew, they're not moving anywhere. You can set up like that. So now, I will warn you, with this technique, you will get a lot of times where your stack doesn't work. There's such a lot of factors involved, not only yourself having to get that focus over the complete subject. You know, sometimes you'll miss the antennae at the front there out of focus, and it just doesn't look right, the image. Other times, you know, your subject won't play ball and it'll move halfway through, and you know, you think you've got it but it's actually moved. Even just something like moving one leg or the antenna moving, you know, you can fix that in post-processing, but you know, it's another thing that can go wrong when you're taking these images. So, you know, persevere with it, and just accept that you will get quite a few times where it doesn't quite work out. But when it does work out, you know, it is really worth it for the type of image that you get. Right, so that's the stacks in the camera. One other tip I would give you is when you're taking multiple stacks, and sometimes of the same subject, it can get quite difficult when you get back to post-processing to know what's the start and end of the one stack and when the next stack starts. So often what I will do, in between each stack, I will just take an individual shot, maybe with just my hand in front of the lens, just so that when I've got them back on the computer, I can see, right, there's a stack, there's a blank shot, that's where that stack ends, and that's where this stack starts. Because obviously what can happen, you can shift your position slightly. If you do one stack and you think, right, now I'm going to do another one, and maybe the subject moves slightly, but it's only slightly. So when you're looking at all that sequence of images, it can be really difficult to see where that first stack stops and the second stack starts. So that's just a method. Just stick your hand or whatever, do something to indicate that that first stack is finished, and then you're moving on to the next one, and it will save you some time in post-processing. So right, let's get these images back into Affinity Photo, and I'll show you what we do in there. Right, so I didn't really want to go a lot into this in this video. If people want me to do a full process of one of these images, then please let me know in the comments below. But for this, all I'm really going to do is go into Affinity Photo. And as I say, this is the software that I use, but Photoshop and other processing software also has this feature on it. And up here in File, you'll see there's a New Focus Merge tab. So if you click on that,
Now for this demonstration, all I'm really going to do is put some JPEGs in here. The reason for that is that if I'm doing in raw images, which is what I would normally do, or big TIFF files, it can take a long time. So I just really wanted to demonstrate how it's done in some software, which others will be different, but there are a lot of similarities between them. So all you're doing is you're adding images to a stack. So I've done some JPEG images here ready. I'm just going to open those in here, and as you can see, that brings them all up. Once you've done that, you just click on OK, and the computer will get to work, and the software aligning all the images and then merging them. Now, as I say, if you're using RAW or TIFF files, this can take quite a long time, especially if you've got a lot of images, and you do need a computer that can handle it. So bear that in mind. But as I say, with this, it shouldn't take too long because there's only about 10 JPEG files that it's stacking and merging together. And as you see, it's finished. It comes up with that image at the end. And there are all the sources there. So if we get rid of those and just do a quick zoom in, as you can see, that's come up with quite a lot of detail for something that, I've just banged some images in that I've not really done a lot with. And then obviously from this point on, what you can do is you would process this image as you would process any image, cropping it to how you want it cropped, sorting the color balances and things and the sharpening, etc., just as you would normally do a normal image. But as I say, for that, just really showing you the process, that's really all we need to look at in this instance. And as I say, not only has Photoshop and other software got this function within it, there are standalone packages that do focus merging as well. So I'll put links to some of those in the description below if you want to have a look at those. Right, I just wanted to do a short addendum to this video at this point, because to be honest, I wasn't going to release this video because I wasn't happy with the images at the end of the video. And if I explain myself a little bit, I started using this technique about August last year. After doing macro photography for years, I started to take it onto that next level, which I believe is macro image stacking. And obviously that means I haven't had much time to practice it, but I have come across a couple of issues that if you're starting this, it may help you and help you with any frustrations. As I say, I wasn't going to put this video out because I wasn't happy with the images. I think the two reasons I'm not happy with the images are, firstly, I don't get enough images for my stack. So when I'm doing a insect or whatever, I tend to go all the way through it shooting, and then I don't sort of reshoot over the top and try and get more images to cover most of the insect. And occasionally what happens is I'll miss a section, and what you'll see on an image, if you don't get focus all the way through, you'll just get an out of focus band on your image when you've stacked it, which obviously looks terrible. So more data is number one, and number two, I'm not somebody who likes to sit for hours in front of the PC doing editing. And for this technique to work properly, I think, in my opinion, you're going to have to spend more time sorting through the stack of images that you've got. And the reason for that is, and I would put it this way, if you put rubbish in, you'll get rubbish out. So these programs are really great at aligning and stacking these images. But if you put one image in there that is substandard, so the lighting's wrong, there's some slight movement, something's changed, and that tries to stack that image, it just throws everything out. And as I say, I'm not one for, if I've got 50, 60 images, sort of going through each one individually and examining it in minute detail to make sure that it's not going to bring that stack down. And that's something that I've got to improve on and hope to improve on over the next 6 months. So I'm putting this video out, and just bear with me the fact that I'm not happy with the images at the end, and you'll probably see why. And just know that sort of in 6 months' time, what I hope to do is put another video out to this, and then I can show you what I've done, hopefully, and what has improved those images. So I think it's worthwhile doing for that reason alone. Right, I really hope you've enjoyed this week's video. It was a really enjoyable one to do. I love macro photography, and this is just a way to take your macro photography forward another step. If you've just really got started in macro photography and wanted to look at other methods where you can get even more detail into your images, well, this is one of the ways that you can do it. I will leave links to some of the other software that you can use in the description below, and also some of the equipment that I use as well. I'll leave links to that because I do get questions about it when people see me using it in the video. I'll do some more macro photography as we move forward into this year. And if you've got any comments actually on the video itself, or anything that you do that you think will help people when they're doing macro photography that you think I've missed, then please leave it in the comments below, because really all we're wanting to do is get as much information for people as possible. And in a short video like this, you can't really cover everything, and there are often little tips that come out that I pick up on that I incorporate when I'm going forward, so it really does help everybody. Anyway, I'll leave you with a couple of the images I took on the day at the end of this video, and I'll see you soon for another one.